The Concordat fleet turned toward home, leaving behind the glittering remains of the Crystal Horde. They had called a Deathworlder in their time of need, and he had taught them more than just how to fight. He had taught them that true wisdom comes not from avoiding what you fear, but from learning to understand it. And somewhere in that field of crystalline debris, a new pattern formed, not one of perfect geometric shapes, but of random, beautiful chaos, just like the pattern of life itself. 2 weeks into training, and Tom Reed could finally see progress. The big simulation room on the Peaceful Dawn had been transformed into what he called organized chaos. The once pristine space now had random obstacles, changing light patterns, and unpredictable environmental hazards, just like a real battlefield. Again, Tom shouted as he watched his team of alien officers run the latest drill. Remember, don't think about what makes sense. Think about what the enemy won't expect. Officer Jack, he'd chosen this simple human name after struggling to teach Tom his real one, was leading today's exercise. His silver scales shimmered as he guided his team through the chaotic obstacle course. They were using modified training ships, small, one-person crafts that handled just like real fighters, but existed only in the simulation. Enemy formation detected, the computer announced, projecting a perfect crystal-shaped arrangement of enemy ships ahead of them. In the past, the Concordat officers would have formed their own perfect counter-formation. But not today. Instead, Jack split his team into 3 uneven groups. 2 ships spun wildly, seeming to lose control. 3 others drove straight at the enemy, but at different speeds. The last ship actually flew backward, its weapons facing an apparently random direction. Tom smiled as he watched the Crystal Horde's simulated ships try to respond. Their perfect formation wavered as their computers attempted to calculate the best response to this apparent madness. Now, Jack yelled, and his seemingly chaotic formation suddenly made sense. The spinning ships had created a distraction. The 3 charging ships had forced the enemy to bunch up. The backward ship had perfect firing position. Within seconds, the enemy formation broke apart. That's what I'm talking about. Tom cheered as the simulation ended. You see, chaos doesn't mean no planning. It means making your plan look like chaos to the enemy. Elder Lisa floated near the control panel, her antennae glowing with excitement. Their logic systems would spend precious seconds trying to find patterns in our movements, she said, even when there are none to find. Exactly. Tom walked to the center of the room. But that's just the beginning. Show me the ground combat exercise we practiced yesterday. The officers quickly moved into position as the room changed. Now they were in a simulated city environment. The Crystal Horde didn't usually fight on the ground, preferring to attack from orbit, but Tom had insisted they prepare for everything. Remember what I taught you about human warfare, Tom said as the officers checked their training weapons. Sometimes the crazy path is the safe path. Sometimes hiding in plain sight works better than perfect cover. Officer Mary, another simplified name, led this exercise. She'd been the most afraid of Tom at first, but now she was one of his best students. They watched as she directed her team to do things that made no logical sense, hiding behind thin walls instead of thick ones, making noise to draw attention away from quiet teammates, even throwing equipment around as distractions. In real combat, Tom explained to Elder Lisa, the Crystal Horde would see these actions as errors. Their targeting systems would ignore obvious distractions because they'd calculate them as inefficient or illogical actions. That's their weakness. The exercise ended with another victory for the training team. The officers gathered around Tom, no longer flinching when he moved quickly or spoke loudly. They'd grown used to their Deathworlder teacher. You're all learning fast, Tom said proudly. But the real test is coming. Our scouts report Crystal Horde ships moving toward the Concordat's outer worlds. Soon we'll have to use these tactics for real. Elder Lisa moved forward, her usual graceful floating replaced by a more direct approach she'd learned from Tom. Will we be ready? Tom looked at his team. Officer Jack was already planning another crazy flight pattern. Officer Mary was teaching others how to use random movements to confuse targeting systems. The rest were suggesting new ways to be unpredictable. "We'll be ready," Tom said firmly. "Because we're not going to fight like the Concordat anymore. We're not going to fight like humans either." He smiled at his strange group of students. "We're going to fight like something entirely new, logical beings who've learned to use chaos as a weapon." The room hummed with nervous energy as everyone understood what he meant. The Crystal Horde thought they were fighting the same old Concordat. They were about to face something they'd never seen before. Aliens who thought like Deathworlders. 3 weeks after their first victory, Tom Reeb stood before the Concordat Council, pointing at a holographic map showing Crystal Horde movements. Red dots marked enemy positions, while blue showed Concordat forces. Elder Marcus leaned forward in his floating chair. "Explain." "Look here," Tom highlighted a recent battle. "They've started using multiple formation types. When we act chaotic, they switch formations rapidly, trying to catch us with mathematical variations." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their advantage was starting to fade. "Then we must become even more unpredictable," Officer Mary said from her position near the door. Her scales had developed a slight metallic sheen, a sign of stress in her species. Tom smiled. "Exactly. Time to show them something they've never seen. Primitive warfare." The council stirred uncomfortably. "Primitive?" Elder Lisa asked. "Sometimes the oldest tricks are the best ones," Tom said. "The Crystal Horde expects advanced technology, complex strategies. So let's show them something from humanity's past." 2 days later, Tom's plan went into action. The Crystal Horde had attacked a major supply route, exactly as he predicted. Their fleet of 15 ships moved in complex, computer-generated patterns, ready for the Concordat's chaos strategy. But this time was different. Officer Jack's voice crackled over the comm. Mineral clouds released, looking just like a natural phenomenon. Tom watched from his command ship as clouds of metallic dust spread through space, appearing to be nothing more than debris from nearby asteroid mining. The Crystal Horde ships passed through it without concern. Their sensors showed it was harmless. "Now," Tom ordered. Officer Mary's squadron activated their magnetic pulse generators. A harmless dust suddenly became charged, sticking to the crystal ship's surfaces. Their beautiful, transparent hulls turned cloudy. "Just like mud on a window," Tom explained to Elder Lisa, who watched from beside him. Sometimes the simplest solutions work best. With their sensors partially blocked by the charged dust, the Crystal Horde ships had to rely on direct visual contact. Their perfect formations began to waver. But Tom wasn't done. Phase 2. This time, Officer Jack led the attack. His ships had been hiding power down among real asteroids, something the Crystal Horde considered too primitive to even check for. They powered up and attacked from point-blank range, their shots accurate and devastating. 3 enemy ships destroyed, Mary reported. "They're trying to calculate a new formation, but the dust is interfering with their ship-to-ship communications." Tom grabbed the command comm. "All ships, execute Operation Stone Age." The Concordat fleet split into tiny groups of 2 or 3 ships each. Instead of using their advanced targeting computers, they relied on visual targeting, just like humans had done in their first space battles. The Crystal Horde's complex defensive algorithms were useless against such basic attacks. "This is incredible," Elder Lisa said, her antennae glowing bright with excitement. "We're using outdated methods to defeat advanced technology." The battle turned into chaos. Real chaos, not the calculated chaos the Crystal Horde had tried to copy. Some Concordat ships deliberately crashed small asteroids into enemy vessels. Others used their engines to blow more dust clouds around. One team even resorted to physical ramming tactics, something that hadn't been used in space combat for centuries. When it was over, 11 Crystal Horde ships had been destroyed. The remaining 4 retreated, their perfect formations completely shattered. In the aftermath, Tom gathered his team for a quick briefing. "This victory was different," he said. "We didn't just use chaos. We used human history. Every primitive tactic we use today was something my species learned the hard way, fighting our way into space. Officer Jack nodded, his silver scales now dusty from the battle. They can't predict what they don't understand, and they don't understand why anyone would choose a simple solution over an advanced one. Exactly, Tom smiled. The Crystal Horde thinks pushing technology to its limits is the answer to everything. But sometimes the best solution is the simple one, the primitive one, the human one. Elder Lisa moved forward, but they will adapt again. They always do. Yes, Tom agreed, which is why our next battle will be even more primitive. Who's ready to learn about something humans call guerrilla warfare? The team's response was unanimous. They had tasted victory using human tactics, and they were ready for more. The Crystal Horde might adapt to each strategy, but they could never adapt to the endless creativity of a species that had evolved fighting against death itself. The great hall of the Stellar Concordat buzzed with fear. Elder Marcus watched the holographic display with his 4 eyes, each one focused on a different part of the devastating report. His silver skin had turned pale gray with worry, a clear sign of distress among his species. The numbers didn't lie. 3 peaceful worlds had fallen in just 2 weeks. The silicon-based invaders, whom they now called the Crystal Horde, showed no interest in talk or trade. They only wanted to consume, to grow, to destroy. "We must face facts," Elder Marcus said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Our peaceful ways have left us helpless." His hand shook as he adjusted his ceremonial robe, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the other council members. Elder Lisa, the youngest of the council at merely 300 years old, stepped forward. Her crystalline antennae glowed with a soft blue light, a sign of deep thought among her kind. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "it is time we consider the unthinkable." The room fell silent. Even the ever-present hum of the environmental systems seemed to quiet down. "You cannot mean." Elder Ron's third eye twitched nervously. "A Deathworlder." The word alone made several council members shuffle backwards in their floating chairs. Deathworlders were the stuff of nightmares, creatures evolved on planets that should have killed them 1,000 times over. Planets with extreme gravity, deadly predators, and constant natural disasters. Planets like Earth. Elder Lisa activated another hologram. This one showed a human fighting off 3 predators during an expedition on Jumbo World, NT 789. The council members watched in horror as the human used nothing but a simple metal tool to survive against beasts twice its size. "This is what we need," Lisa said firmly. "Someone who understands violence. Someone who can think like our enemy." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Someone who evolved facing death every day." Elder Marcus rubbed his temple ridges. "The humans are unpredictable, dangerous. They solve problems in ways that defy logic." He waved his hand through the hologram, changing the scene to a human settlement on Mars. "Look at their history. They turned a lifeless rock into a garden through sheer stubbornness. They survive in places where survival should be impossible." "Exactly." Lisa's antennae glowed brighter. "The Crystal Horde operates on pure logic. They expect us to follow patterns, to behave rationally. But humans?" She laughed softly. "Humans are anything but rational." The council chamber erupted in worried whispers. Calling in a human was unprecedented. The Stellar Concordat had always prided itself on solving problems through peaceful means, through logic and diplomacy. But the Crystal Horde had changed everything. Elder Ron floated forward, his chair humming softly. "If we do this, there's no going back. Our people will have to accept working with a creature that evolved through constant conflict. Are we ready for that?" Another hologram appeared, showing the latest attack. The Crystal Horde's ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, their attacks precisely calculated. Below them, another peaceful world burned. Elder Marcus stood up, using all 4 arms to steady himself. "We are not ready," he said heavily. "But we are out of options." He turned to face the full council. All those in favor of requesting human assistance, raise your primary hand. Slowly, hands began to rise. First Lisa's, then Ron's, then others. One by one, the council members acknowledged the terrible truth. Their civilization's best hope lay in the hands of a species they had long viewed with a mixture of fear and fascination. Then it is decided, Marcus announced, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision. We will call a Deathworlder. May the stars forgive us for what we must do. As the council session ended, Elder Lissa looked once more at the human hologram. The creature was smiling, showing its teeth, in what she had learned was not a threat display but a sign of friendship. Perhaps, she thought, working with a Deathworlder would teach them more than just how to fight. Perhaps it would teach them how to truly live. They're learning, Tom explained, not how to be truly chaotic. They can't do that. But they're learning to predict our patterns of unpredictability. The final battle began where it all started, near the Concordet's central worlds. The Crystal Horde had gathered their entire remaining fleet, over 50 ships strong, for one last attack. Their crystalline vessels filled the space like a glittering cloud of deadly diamonds. Tom Reeves stood on the bridge of the Concordat flagship, now renamed Chaos Prime, at his crew's insistence. Officer Jack and Officer Mary commanded their own ships nearby. Elder Lisa, despite the council's protests, had refused to stay behind. They're trying something new, Mary reported. Multiple formation layers, each moving independently. Tom nodded. They think they've finally created true chaos through mathematics. Let's show them real chaos. The Concordat fleet was smaller, just 30 ships, but every captain had learned to think like a Deathworlder. Every crew had embraced the beautiful madness of human combat tactics. Begin Operation Final Lesson, Tom ordered. The battle that followed would be studied in Concordat military academies for centuries to come. The Crystal Horde's fleet moved in their most complex patterns yet, their ships shifting between formations with mathematical precision. But the Concordat fleet didn't counter with their own chaos this time. Instead, they did something even more unexpected. They split into tiny groups and fled in all directions. They're retreating. The Crystal Horde commander's transmission was intercepted, their confidence clear. The Deathworlder's tactics have failed. Tom smiled. Now, suddenly, the seeming retreat revealed its true purpose. Each small group of Concordat ships had moved to a specific position, creating a massive three-dimensional web around the Crystal Horde fleet. Then, at Tom's signal, they released their secret weapon. Launch the disruptors, Tom commanded. Thousands of tiny devices, no bigger than a human hand, shot out from the Concordat ships. The Crystal Horde sensors barely registered them. They were too simple, too primitive to be considered a threat. That was their final mistake. The devices were based on an old human mining tool, modified by Tom and his team. When activated, they created a web of overlapping sonic pulses, harmless to most ships, but devastating to crystalline structures. The Crystal Horde realized too late what was happening. Their beautiful ships began to vibrate, the perfect crystalline patterns that made them so strong becoming their greatest weakness. Their formations are breaking. Officer Jack called out. They can't maintain their patterns. Tom grabbed the fleet-wide comm. All ships, attack with everything you have. Show them what chaos really means. The Concordat fleet struck from all directions. Some ships charged straight in, ignoring all standard combat protocols. Others spun and wove between enemy vessels, firing from impossible angles. A few even shut down their engines completely, drifting silently until they were in perfect firing position. The Crystal Horde tried to adapt, their computers frantically calculating responses. But between the sonic disruption and the completely unpredictable attacks, their perfectly ordered fleet fell into disarray. We've broken their center formation, Mary reported excitedly. They're trying to regroup, but they can't, Tom finished, because they're still trying to find patterns in chaos. The battle raged for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, The crystal horde ships shattered, their fragments creating a glittering field of debris. When the last enemy ship fell silent, the cheers aboard the Concordat vessels were deafening. Even Elder Lisa found herself shouting in victory. Tom watched the celebration with a quiet smile. Officer Jack approached him, no longer showing any fear of the Deathworlder's quick movements. "You taught us more than just how to fight," Jack said. "You taught us that sometimes strength comes from embracing what you fear." Elder Lisa floated over, her antennae glowing with joy and understanding. "We feared chaos because we didn't understand it. We feared Deathworlders because they represented everything we tried to eliminate from our civilization." "And now?" Tom asked. "Now we understand," she replied. "True strength isn't in perfect order or complete chaos. It's in knowing when to use each." As the fleet regrouped for the journey home, Tom looked at the aftermath of the battle. The scattered crystal fragments caught the light of nearby stars, creating a beautiful, chaotic pattern. "The crystal horde failed," he said, "because they tried to understand chaos through logic. But some things can't be calculated or predicted. Sometimes, the only way to understand chaos is to embrace it." The training room aboard the Concordat ship Peaceful Dawn was anything but peaceful. Tom Reed stood in the center, surrounded by holographic projections of the Crystal Horde's previous battles. His small ship had been docked with the much larger Concordat vessel for 3 days now, and he was finally ready to show them what he'd learned. "Your entire military strategy is wrong," he announced to the gathered aliens. Elder Lisa and a group of 20 volunteer officers watched him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You fight like you're playing chess. They fight like they're playing chess. But war isn't chess." To prove his point, Tom walked through a hologram showing the Crystal Horde's most recent victory. "Look here," he said, freezing the image. "Their ships always maintain perfect geometric patterns. When you attack, you try to match their formations with your own. That's your first mistake." Elder Lisa's antennae flickered with confusion. "But proper formations maximize defensive capabilities and make you perfectly predictable," Tom interrupted. He waved his hand, starting a new simulation. "Watch this." The hologram showed a small fleet of Concordat ships arranged in their usual precise formation. Then Tom's program showed a single ship-breaking formation, spinning wildly and firing its engines in random bursts. The Crystal Horde's perfect pattern immediately began to break down as they tried to calculate responses to the erratic movement. "This is madness," one of the officers said, his scaled skin changing color in distress. "Such movements waste fuel and expose weaknesses." Tom grinned. "Exactly. They can't predict what they think is impossible. You're not fighting their ships. You're fighting their minds, their computers, their logic." He turned to face the group. "And nothing breaks logic like human chaos." To demonstrate further, Tom called up a historical record from Earth. "Look at this old Earth battle, guerrilla fighters against a superior force. See how they use the environment, strike from unexpected angles, retreat when it makes no sense to retreat." The aliens watched in fascination as the historical battle played out. Their expressions shifted from horror to reluctant understanding as they saw how the seemingly chaotic tactics led to victory. "But we're not built for such randomness," another officer said. "Our bodies, our minds, they're designed for order." Tom walked over to a weapons rack and picked up a training pistol. "Then we'll have to change how you think. Your bodies might not be built for chaos, but your minds can learn." He tossed the pistol to Elder Lisa, who caught it awkwardly. "Let's start with something simple. Try to hit me." The training room went silent. Elder Lisa held the pistol like it might bite her. "Hit you, but you're not wearing any protection." "Exactly." Tom spread his arms wide. "The pistol is set to training mode. It'll just mark me with light if you hit. But you won't hit me, because you'll try to aim logically. You'll calculate angles, consider the most efficient path. And while you're doing that..." He suddenly dropped and rolled, making several officers jump back in alarm. "Coming up behind a pillar," he continued, I'll already be somewhere else. For the next hour, Tom had them practice. Each officer took turns trying to hit him with the training weapon. Every time they aimed carefully, thought about their shot, or tried to predict his movements mathematically, they missed. But when one young officer got frustrated and fired randomly in Tom's general direction, she actually grazed his arm. "Perfect," Tom shouted, making everyone jump again. "You hit me because you stopped thinking like a computer and started thinking like a living thing." Elder Lisa watched from the side, her antennae glowing brighter as she began to understand. "We've spent centuries perfecting our civilization, removing chaos from our lives," she said quietly, "and now our survival depends on embracing it." Tom nodded. "You don't have to become chaos. You just have to understand it. Use it." He looked at each of them in turn. The Crystal Horde thinks they're fighting the Stellar Concordat. Logical, predictable, orderly. Instead, they're going to fight something they've never seen before. "And what's that?" asked one of the officers. Tom's smile was fierce. "They're going to fight a Concordat that's learned to think like a Deathworlder. Now, let's try that exercise again. But this time, I want you all to forget everything you know about proper combat techniques." The training room erupted into action once more, and for the first time since the Crystal Horde appeared, there was hope in the air. Chaotic, unpredictable, human hope. Tom Reed was cleaning his old combat boots when the message arrived. The small apartment on Mars Colony's outer ring wasn't much, but it had a view of the red desert that reminded him of his military days. The message alert blinked on his wall screen, marked with the highest priority level he'd seen in years. "Play message," he said, not looking up from his boots. When he heard the distinctive musical tones of the Stellar Concordat's official channel, his hands froze mid-polish. The hologram showed a tall, silver-skinned alien with 4 eyes. "Mr. Reed," the creature said in carefully practiced human English, "I am Elder Marcus of the Stellar Concordat. We require your unique capabilities." Tom put down his boots and stood up. At 6 feet tall, he wasn't particularly big for a human, but he knew that to most alien species, he might as well have been a giant. "I'm listening," he said, crossing his arms. The message continued, explaining the situation with the Crystal Horde. As Tom listened, he began to understand why they'd called him. The Concordat needed someone who understood violence, who could think outside their carefully ordered box. They needed a Deathworlder. 6 hours later, Tom stood in the reception chamber of a Concordat ship, trying not to smile at the way the alien crew kept their distance. He'd forgotten how funny it was, watching peaceful species react to humans. Every time he moved too quickly, they flinched. Elder Lisa met him at the door to the council chamber. Her antennae glowed with a mix of colors that Tom recognized as anxiety and curiosity. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said. "Though I must warn you, some of the council members are uncomfortable with your presence." Tom nodded. "That's normal. Don't worry, I won't bite." He grinned, then quickly stopped when he remembered that showing teeth was considered aggressive in some cultures. The council chamber was huge, with floating chairs arranged in a circle around a central hologram projector. Tom noticed how the chairs nearest to him suddenly drifted a few feet further away. He pretended not to notice. Elder Marcus began the meeting by showing the latest battle footage. The Crystal Horde ships moved in perfect formations, their attacks precise and calculated. Tom watched carefully, seeing what the Concordat couldn't. "They're too perfect," he said, interrupting Elder Ron's detailed explanation of their defensive failures. "That's their weakness." The council fell silent. Elder Lisa floated forward. "Please explain." Tom stepped into the hologram, pointing at the enemy formations. "Look at these patterns. Everything they do is based on perfect math, perfect logic. They've never faced an enemy who acts illogically." He smiled. "They've never faced a human. But our simulations show," Elder Ron began. "Your simulations are part of the problem," Tom interrupted. "You're thinking like them, trying to find the perfect solution. But sometimes the best solution is no solution at all. Sometimes you need chaos. To demonstrate his point, Tom walked through the hologram to a nearby table. Without warning, he flipped it over. The crash echoed through the chamber, making several council members recoil in alarm. "See your reaction just now," Tom said calmly. "That's what we want from them. They don't know how to handle the unexpected. They don't understand chaos." Elder Marcus's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "You propose to fight them by being unpredictable." "I propose to fight them by being human," Tom corrected. "We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to survive by being adaptable, by doing the unexpected." He paused, looking each council member in the eyes. "Your civilization achieved peace through order. That's admirable. But right now, you don't need order. You need someone who knows how to break it." The council chamber stayed quiet for a long moment. Finally, Elder Lisa spoke. "What do you need to begin?" Tom smiled again, this time not caring if it made them uncomfortable. "First, I need a ship, something small and fast. Then I need volunteers, anyone willing to learn how to think like a Deathworlder." He looked around the room. "And most importantly, I need you to trust me, even when what I'm doing seems crazy to you." Elder Marcus rose from his chair. "Very well, Mr. Reed. Welcome to the Stellar Concordat's Defense Force." He paused. "May the stars help us all."